So a few months ago, I installed the Yabai and Sketchy bar on my system, and it's been working great so far. For example, I can open up a bunch of windows, and Yabai will automatically rearrange and tile them for me, so I don't need to worry about where all my windows are and have to use like a window manager like a rectangle. With Sketchy bar, I have this space status bar at the bottom that when I move my windows around, it shows me which apps are in what spaces. Something that throws me off a bit is the window gap here. Now, at this intersection, there's this straight edge, but there's also these two rounded edges. If you're coming from Linux or Windows, you obviously know that you have square edges, and I think square edges are superior. So, about a week ago, I figured out how to add square edges to this, and I posted up a guide on GitHub. But this guide is still kind of janky because it doesn't exactly show you how to actually create and patch those system files. So I thought I'd clarify it with the video here. Now the first thing we're going to do is disable SIP. Now SIP is System Integrity Protection, and it's sort of like a low-level gatekeeper for macOS. What it does is that it prevents the user, even root users, from directly tampering with system resources like the /system folder. Now, to disable SIP, you need to boot into recovery mode, open up a terminal, and then use the csrutil utility to modify the system integrity protection configuration. So in recovery mode, you're going to run csrutil disable. Now, since we're going to be modifying and then trying to boot off a modified volume, we also want to disable authenticated root. So csrutil authenticated root disable. Now, of course, you need to do this in recovery OS. And then you could run csrutil status to verify that SIP is disabled, and similarly csrutil authenticated root status. And we can see that that's also disabled, so we're ready to continue. Now, the system's library folder that we're going to be modifying is located at system/library/course services. System appearances, contents, and resources. Now, of course, we need to back up all the files in case we accidentally overwrite any of those. So cp-r resources, and let's put that in somewhere like documents /resources square backup, and then sudo. I recommend that you back up this folder to at least 3 places. So the first place is just any local backup. The second place is going to be the copy that we're actually going to be modifying. And then lastly, our third place is a removable external volume, like a flash drive or an SD card, that you can physically untether from your laptop so you don't accidentally overwrite any of your backup files as well. But right now, we're just going to be using the one at documents. So let's go back to documents. And then since we copied this over from the system folder, this is going to have the same restricted permissions of the system folder. So we want to modify the permissions on this folder. Square backup. And this just modifies the folder permissions so that we can make changes to what's inside the folder with the recursive flag. And let's open up this folder. So in this folder, we can see that there's a lot of files. We're going to be primarily focusing on aqua.car. Aqua is what macOS refers to internally as its desktop environment. And then dark mode would be darkaqua.car. The instructions are the same, but your assets file is going to look a little bit different. So if you run fast fetch or something similar, you can see that the display desktop environment is aqua. So we're going to be using a utility called theme engine, which is an app that allows you to view these .car asset files. The latest release was published in 2016, but it's still a perfectly usable utility. So once we open this file, we should be able to see a bunch of images. We're going to navigate all the way down here to window frame, window shape edges. Now, this container contains all the files that macOS or Apple actually uses to create the border radiuses around your windows. These are just all PNG files. So we have the red masks for the internal mask, and then these are actually transparent PNGs. So you can actually, this gray part is the alpha layer, and then what's only in this, actually in this file, is just this top white part. So we want to erase the white parts and we want to fill in the red parts. We can do that really easily with something like GIMP. First, let's open up the documents folder again. And then let's just drag and drop this into this folder. And then now this is just a standard PNG file. What we can do then is right click and open with GIMP. With GIMP, we can use the bucket fill utility. And then we can use the eyedrop to select this color and then fill in the rest. Oops, that's white. There it is. And we just fill in all the edges until it's a full red square. I'm sure there's better ways that you could somehow script this, but this is a one-time thing realistically, so I'm going to do all these by hand. And File, Save, Overwrite in place. So now we can just close it, and we don't really care about the actual GIMP file. So now if you see, the same file is just a fully filled in red square. After that, we're just going to drag and drop. And then we're going to repeat the same process for all these other red ones as well. Now you got to be careful which file you're dropping into place, because these are all different files. So for example, this one is normal, but its scale is 2x, and this one is normal, but its scale is only 1x. There's also active and inactive. Let me see if I can find one. So this one's presentation is active, and this one is inactive. So you got to make sure that you're replacing and overwriting in place the correct files. So you do the same thing for the red ones, and then we're going to go to do these for these white ones. So the process is the same. We drag and drop this, and we open it with GIMP. So after it's opened, we can see that it's just 99% an alpha layer, but with these two rounded white edges on it. To remove these, we can just use the selection tool. And realistically, we can just do a rectangle select for this. Select all of this, and then delete it. And then we can File, Overwrite in place, and close GIMP. And now if we open this file, it's just completely blank. Oops, we don't want to close that yet. And you're going to do all of this until these are completely filled in, and then the transparent ones have their border removed. Now you should have an assets file that looks like this, where all of these are completely filled in, and then all of these are completely transparent. Now we can save as, let's put this in our root folder so it's easy to access. Just save it as aqua.car. Now, this is the actual dangerous process where we're going to be overwriting the system file and asking macOS to boot off the new modified volume. First, we need to find which disk we actually want to modify. We can find this with just mount, and the system disk is going to be the one that's just mounted on a single /. Now, this is actually a volume, so for the disk, we actually just want to drop the S and the 1 at the end. So just disk 3S3. If you want to find this with one command, you could just do this, and that gives you that, and you strip out the bottom S. Now we need to create a mounting location for this disk that we can use to create a new snapshot for the modified volume. You can make any location you want. I'm just going to make it called live disk mount. And now we have this location. Now we're going to mount the actual disk, which is /dev/disk3s3 on this location. So sudo mount, and then to specify the type of volume it is, dev/disk3s3 live disk mount. And after this, you should have a copy of your disk mounted at the mount location. So if we ls live disk mount, you should see that we have the entire replica of the physical disk. Now this is where we can actually copy our files into. So copy our aqua.car file into live disk mount /system/library/core services system appearances contents resources aqua.car, and this will overwrite aqua.car in this directory. So we enter, and then we need to bless the volume, which is just to tell the system to boot off this modified snapshot instead. So sudo bless mount live disk mount and that creates a new snapshot that the system will boot on next time it's powered on. So at this point, all we need to do is shut down and restart the system. And after you do a full reboot, you can open up anything you want. You can see your raycast already there, and you should have square corners now. And this makes Windows tiling, in my opinion, much better looking. So now there's not as awkward as a rounded corner in the gaps.